Welcome to the Road to Redemption podcast with your host, Cam Williamson. Each week, Cam sets out to shatter the labels and stigmas associated with mental health awareness by giving life lessons and raw overviews of events happening around the world.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to this episode of the Road to Redemption podcast. I'm, as always, your host, Cam Williamson, and I'm stoked to be back with you today with what I think is going to be a fun episode, fitting right in the wheelhouse of kind of sliding out of our last episode talking about mental health stigmas and things like that. I want to remind you guys, if you see the designs behind us, for a little housekeeping, today at noon, when you guys, right about the time you guys should be seeing this video, over at the Road to Redemption podcast, we do have a new design dropping today. So if you guys want to grab that. But first things first, we got to get into this episode. I spent the weekend watching a show. If you guys know anything about me, I'm usually way behind the eight ball on watching popular shows or anything like that. I got to watch Love on the Spectrum, and I was a little hesitant at first. I don't know. I'm always weary when I start watching anything that has to do with people and disabilities because I have a very strong sensitivity to it. So I don't ever want to see someone be made fun of or put in situations that maybe doesn't paint them in the most flattering way, if that makes sense. So I started the show, and I forget who the first character you meet is. I don't think it was Michael, but maybe it was. Michael's kind of the star of the show. And maybe they do start with Michael. And Michael is easily the most highly functioning one, I think, of the ones that they feature on the show, outside of the girl, and I forget her name. Let's start with Michael, because he's my personal favorite, and I think he's a lot of other people's favorite as well. Michael is super high functioning. I think Michael introduced a lot of people to the way that Asperger's, which most people here in the States would call it Asperger's.
My name is Michael, and I happen to be a 25-year-old man.
How do you feel about being on the spectrum?
Well, autism is just a neurological disability. People with Asperger's or autism, they just learn things a different way.
That's how people like Jim Parsons introduced it to us, and even Elon Musk, when he announced it on Saturday Night Live. These are the first times for us as Americans that we've kind of heard this, and we've known, and I think Chris Rock even came out and said he's somewhere on the spectrum of either autism or Asperger's. I choose to use the term Asperger's now, and that the way that it's said by Michael, someone who has it and is very high functioning with it. Let's get back to the show though. So the first date, Michael's talking about his expectations, who he is as a person. He's a formal gentleman. That's how he wants everyone to see him. That's how he wants to carry himself. You don't really know throughout the first season the relationship that he has with his father. His mother is featured mostly through the show with him, and his mother's amazing. I believe her name's Vanessa. She's amazing. I'm actually still listening to it, a podcast called No Filter, where him and his mom, Michael and his mother, are on there talking about life after the show, and it's kind of cool. I really like her take on it. She explains why she never put Michael in a school specifically for people on the spectrum, and why he associates with more people who are not neurodivergent or neurotypical, I think is what they call it, and had people more in his life that were atypical, or as we call it, normal, which I'm trying not to use that. Michael, first things first, is expressing his passion for being a modern gentleman, treating women right. A lot of the things he sees, whether it be in the media or maybe just in his personal life, he doesn't have any tolerance for treating women in any way other than treating them like queens. Now, it starts here a little bit, because when you look at this whole show and you look at the people, actors, they're not actors because they're real people. It is a scripted show, but when you see the people in the show who are being featured, you can notice that one theme is they kind of have an unrealistic expectation of what a relationship is going to be like. Michael, out of all of them, has clearly done the most studying. He's clearly the most passionate about finding a partner, being a partner, and having a relationship look a very certain way. I talked a lot in the episode about ending stigmas about how there's a big one about hyper-focus on certain passions. I even mentioned dinosaurs. Well, there's Mark in the show who does love dinosaurs. He fancies himself kind of a paleontologist. And Mark is, and I'll come back to Michael for a second, but Mark is very aware of who he is, what he is. I think he's less aware about what he wants in a girlfriend or in a partner. He just knows that he wants one. And that is very common across all of them. They all know that they want a relationship because they see it in movies, they see it on TV, they admire the relationship that their parents have, or the lack of. The one girl, Teo, she was adopted, and she always admired the relationship that her adoptive parents had. It's interesting because their view of relationships is not far off from even people like myself, where we have these fantasies about the way that we think relationships are supposed to be, and we can really make a mess of them sometimes when we try too hard, right? That's a big theme I think Michael learned throughout was sometimes the very first date he went on with the girl, he took her to a very formal restaurant because that's what Michael wants, Michael wants, and he took her and she freaked out. She's not a formal person. So the anxiety alone from being in a formal situation when she's not a formal person sent her into kind of a panic attack where it wasn't loud, it wasn't sensory overload or anything like that, which is something you would typically see to bother someone on the spectrum. Michael enjoys being in a nice restaurant. You see his relationship with his parents. His mom laughs and makes a lot of noise and stuff. Like, in the right conditions, they thrive. I think the one time I got a little upset throughout the show with, you could tell it was the producers, were orchestrating a lot of things, and even one of the one couple they had on the show that were like already engaged when the show started, so I'm not quite sure why they were featured other than the fact that the girl was on the spectrum. But their relationship was so interesting because I don't even think he was. They never mentioned that he was, but she was very much like, her thing was collecting business cards, and that was her hyper focus. Anytime she met someone who had a business, she wanted their business card, and she had like tons and tons of books of that. I got a little upset, not with them. I thought it was weird, the dynamic of the one guy that I didn't really think was autistic, and he just kept making creepy comments about her body. But there was another girl who lived with her parents still. She was into cosplay stuff on a smaller scale than the girl who kept, I forget her name. Cheyenne was the girl who did cosplay on a bigger scale, and she was bisexual. This girl was not bisexual, and she went to this like smaller cosplay that you could tell was for people with disabilities, and the production team set them up outside to have this awkward conversation that the guy clearly wasn't able to have. He was, I don't know if it was the cameras or whatever it was, but he starts just going, yeah, and he's like making these weird noises and like tics, and he's not making eye contact, which a lot of them do throughout the show. But this guy was so clearly not set and ready for this situation, and they were like, do you want to go back inside? He goes, yes, and he just like gets up and walks, and that kind of shit. The reason I support the show to begin with is because their families are involved, right? So I respect the family's decisions and how they want to handle their family dynamic. So in Michael's situation, his mother said very clearly, I didn't want him to go to a school specified to people on the spectrum because I think sometimes those schools can encourage or enable the behavior that we don't want to encourage, like the outrages and the outbursts and the hyper focusing on passion. She was like, it's good to have passions, but we gotta put a fine line on a balance for it. And I was like, damn, well, we can all learn a lesson from that, huh? And that was one of the things I found interesting, maybe with the popularity of this show or the popularity of Atypical or whatever it might be. But you find autism, or being on the autism spectrum, is like the one, I don't even consider it a disability. It's just it's the way your brain works, but it's the one thing that people are almost, they want to have it. Have you noticed that? Has anybody else noticed that, like, when it comes to people speaking about autism, a lot of people will go, oh yeah, I probably have some of that. I'm probably on the spectrum somewhere. Where we don't do that with Down syndrome. Nobody is ever like, oh yeah, I might be on the Down syndrome spectrum somewhere. I find it interesting. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing that people relate. And obviously this show got massive because I think people can relate a lot to the struggles. I'll tell you what, there is nothing that will tear at your heartstrings more than to get to know these people on the level that you can on the show. Watch them go on these dates and see how much they care. And then you watch them struggle, not because they're incapable, but almost because you can tell they care too much. For instance, everything is learned, right, by the individuals that are featured on the show. So they have to learn, and they have a dating coach that comes throughout the show to different people. But they have to learn social interaction. The very simple things that neurotypical people would do. Hey, how are you? How's it going? Weather's nice today. Yeah, okay, cool. How's the family? Right on, cool. We can do that, and I'm not going to stare into your eyes for either a long amount of time, or I'm not going to be like, hey man, what's up? Good to see you. And I'm not going to stare over here because that's going to make you uncomfortable. You're like, what the fuck are you looking at? But they might, because inside their mind, so much is going on. It may be the scene around them. But most of the time, I'm talking about on this show, you see, like with Michael, he's so locked in. Is she comfortable? Is she safe? Is she being treated properly? And does she feel like she's being treated like a queen? He is so hyper-focused on that I think his date can feel that. And they almost feel a pressure to live up to this standard. And I think that's where the anxiety came in for the first girl. I think she realized it was just not a match super quickly. And where neurotypical people, if we go on a date and we realize maybe that it's not going to go anywhere, we will finish out an hour-long date without saying that. We'll waste our own time, where you notice people on the spectrum, they don't waste their time. They've got zero interest and have no willingness to waste their damn time. One of my favorite points was Mark took his date that I thought went really well with Chloe. He took her to a park, and it was a park where they had intermixed robot dinosaurs, and he was telling her everything he knew about dinosaurs. And he was like, do you like dinosaurs? And she goes, no. And he goes, okay. And it was just how flat honest they are. I was like, yo, respect to the game, my guy. More of us need to be like that, where you just go, look, man, this is how I am. Do you care a lot about this thing? No? Okay. Well, I think it's time we take our leave then, yeah? And that was their thing. With the show, we'll talk about this. First off, let me talk about my guy, Ronan. My homie Ronan. God, come on. What's not to love about this fucking guy? Okay, Ronan was probably... Now, okay, let's talk about this for pause. Let's talk about this first. I don't know if it's my television or my Netflix account. I watched this on Netflix. It didn't play the show in order. So I watched, apparently the second season has like 6 episodes and the first season has 5 or 6 or something like that. all together, there's 11 episodes, I think, on Netflix now. My Netflix started the show season 2, episode 1, played through 5, and then it went back and played season 1, episode 6, and played them backwards. So when I'm watching some of this, they were like, Michael's going on his very first date for the first time. And I'm like, no, he's not. We saw him go on a date before. Then I realized I had the timeline all mixed up. That's why I'm not great with the characters or where they were actually in the show. I think Ronan was actually in season 2. Oh my God. Sweetest man alive. He likes cars. He loves Formula One. He likes sprint cars and stuff like that. He was so in love with the idea of having a girl in his life that he could love on, show affection to, be kind to. The way he made her picnic for her, and his importance of making sure that she was comfortable. I find that so fascinating throughout. Mark, not so much. Mark is very much about, he wants to make sure it's good for him, which is not a bad thing. Michael and Ronan specifically hyper-focused on, are you comfortable? Are you okay? I think that's fascinating. I think that's something that neurotypical people don't do enough. I think some of us could be more like Mark, where it's, I'm not really interested in this person, or what they're saying, I don't care. Or they're not talking that much, and we don't think maybe they're anxious right now. They're on a first date too, and maybe they're not handling it as well as I am. So, hey, are you doing okay? Are you a little anxious? You notice every one of them almost addresses that. I'm a little nervous, And then they bond over it, and then the dates that would take off, they took off. After that was at least addressed and acknowledged, we're like, oh, good. Well, at least I'm not the only one. I really enjoyed the show. I didn't understand why they played so much into the bisexuality thing. Why was that important so much? I don't know. It felt a little exploitative, however you would say that. It felt like it was unnecessary to highlight it so much, where it was like, hey, if you're going to put them on dates with these people, then just put them on the date. Don't point it out. They kept pointing out every time that the bisexual thing was brought up. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I just didn't understand the hyper-focus on it if there was already the niche focus was on dating people on the spectrum. So unless you were putting the collective together that we thought bisexuality was a big thing in the autistic community, I think that would be tough. So I thought, like in any other situation, in any other show, if they're going to date a man or a woman, well, just put them on a date with them. You don't have to say it. Just, okay, they dated a man and a woman in the same show, so I think we get it. Why do I care if they're called a pansexual or a bisexual? I don't care. Just put them on a fucking date. That's why I'm watching the show. I want to see how they interact with people. Because if he interacts with a man better than he does a woman, well, we're going to realize that and go, oh, hey, maybe that's his gig. But I just felt that the way that they did it, sorry, my nose is still running a little bit. I'm like on the tail end of having this freaking cold. I felt the way they did it was like, ooh, look, they're bisexual too. And it's like, yeah, a lot of people are. Who gives a shit? And it almost made it weird for the ones that weren't, because they were like, nope. Michael one time was like, nope, I just girls. And I think a lot of, heterosexual men like myself, we can kind of relate to that in today's day and age, where you do feel a little defensive sometimes when you're not bisexual or not in anything, you don't identify as anything other than straight. And it's like, I've lived 30 years of my life, right? So a lot of people, and I've had tons of gay, straight, bisexual friends in my life, plenty. And I'm still friends with a lot of them today. And I can tell you, from being around their community and being around my own, I've never once had a fantasy about being in any sort of romantic relationship with a man. So any bisexual person, and plenty of them have tried, will say, well, everyone's a little bit on this sexuality spectrum. Sexuality is a spectrum. Sure, I think everything's kind of a spectrum. But if that's the case, understand spectrums have extreme sides on both. So there's people that are way on this side and way on that side. It's okay to be a straight man or a woman and be into who you're into. Just don't look down upon anyone else for who they choose to be into, right? So again, I thought it was a little, I just thought it was a little unnecessary to highlight it the way they did, especially when the relationships don't work out, because then you're just kind of like, that just led to a lot of confusion and a lot of, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a straight white man and I'm still coming to terms with having unnecessary conversations. I didn't grow up where conversations like that were even necessary. You just didn't have to have them. I think if we're focusing on the human beings on the spectrum having these relationships, then fine. We can talk about why they're interested in having relationships with different types of people, but like you notice they didn't classify why they were willing to have dates with certain races of people. That would be insane. But they were saying it's not about, gender, it's about their spirit, it's about their personality. Well, that's the case for everyone. Should be anyway. I think you'll find very quickly if you date someone just because they're a woman or a man, that's not going to lead to a successful relationship just because of that. So I think, again, we need to not use things that we're trying to raise awareness. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time speaking today. If we're trying to raise awareness to people on the spectrum, and sure, it is an entertainment thing. It's a dating show specifically for people on the spectrum, but we're raising awareness to their attempts. And I saw one video on YouTube already where a girl who has autism was saying the things she didn't care for in the show, and she was saying that the producers were forcing the featured people in the show into neurotypical type situations. My defense to that would be people like Michael's mom. Well, that's the route they chose to take. And Michael has a strong desire to intermix with the neurotypical, society. Where you look at people like Ronan, they did secluded park picnics by themselves. They didn't go and do a bunch of crazy stuff because the families behind the scenes were probably like, no, that's going to be too much. No. I noticed that as much as I enjoyed watching Ronan's story, he was not on there as much as Mark and Michael and some of the other ones because I think he does struggle a lot with social interaction. I can't say enough good things about the show. There was another guy that came in towards, I don't know if he was on season 1 because I'm just watching his story now, so he must be. Kelvin, the Asian gentleman, it was him and his father. That guy, man. Oh, talk about a heartbreaker because all he wanted to do was find a woman that he could love on, like one of his anime characters that he saw. And that goes back to what we had talked about, where some of the things they think about relationships may be a little unrealistic. That, Kelvin's, I think that was his name, idea might be that his future wife would dress like Sailor Moon or something like that is a little concerning just because it's extreme. But you also see that there's a serious interest by the autistic community in cosplay and stuff like that. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And I think that's where the shows like this do a good job, right? Nothing's going to be perfect. We're going to swing and miss, especially when we're doing stuff for the first time, right? We're going to do things and go, oh, fuck, probably shouldn't have put that scene in there. That scene where the girl is doing the smaller scale cosplay and they put that guy and her outside just to say she had a date there, they should not have done that. I think they'll learn by people's the market research on that one, that was a bad call. Let's not do that one again. We need to screen the participants and make sure that they are all capable of at least handling the situation they're in. They did a great job if people were not comfortable of going, do y'all need a break? You guys want a break? All right, cool. And you could tell Michael really trusted one of the producers named Cyan, I think, because when things would start happening, he would start calling for him. Cyan, hey, like, is she okay? So it shows you that there was control. You also saw the parents were always very close by. Like when Mark would leave his dates, he would walk around the corner. They would do the traditional dating show send-off where the girl walks away into the sunset. But when it was over, Mark would walk down the side of the street, and his mom would be standing there. And she, how's it going? How'd it go? And I thought it was just great. I think it's a great show. I hope that they keep it going. I hope that, again, I don't want to exploit anyone for anything. I think raising awareness and exploiting is two very different things. I don't enjoy it, and they did this with Teo, where they hyper-focused on her bisexuality, but they also hyper-focused on her political views. I didn't enjoy that. I'm not saying she can't express who she is, but it's not what we need. If we're raising awareness to the normalcy and how people of all walks of life could find themselves on the spectrum and find themselves in certain social challenges, I think one of the biggest lessons we could learn in today is we don't need to highlight people's political views, and we don't need to put that on shows that are supposed to be helping and causing unity and not division. So that's just my personal take on it. I got to run because I got to get this launch set up and finalized and stuff. I hope you guys will join me over there at the Road to Redemption podcast. If you haven't already, please thumbs up this video. Subscribe to the channel. I've got a strong goal to get to 10,000 subscribers by March. I think we can do it. I just need you guys' help. It takes hitting the thumbs up button. That helps way more than you guys think. I didn't even know that for the longest time. It helps way more than you guys think. Subscribe. That way you guys know anytime I drop something. The more you watch things and hit the thumbs up button, the more YouTube's going to let you know about it. And other than that, know how much I love you. And we will see you guys on Wednesday. Love you.